My name is Beatrice, and I am 67 years old. I never thought I would find myself sleeping in a garage in the middle of winter after gifting our family home to my daughter Catherine. The Victorian house I had lovingly maintained for 35 years became my prison when her husband Jason took over. The garage was freezing cold, with only a thin blanket between me and the harsh Massachusetts winter. He thought I had nowhere else to go, but he was wrong. If you are watching this from somewhere comfortable, let me know what you would do in my situation. Do not forget to like and subscribe to follow my journey of heartbreak and resilience. After my husband Thomas passed away from heart disease 7 years ago, I found myself alone in the spacious Victorian home we had purchased as newlyweds. Our three-bedroom house in a quiet Massachusetts suburb had been our pride and joy for 35 years. Thomas and I had saved for years to buy it carefully, selecting a home with character that we could fill with love and memories. The old hardwood floors that had initially been covered with shabby carpet were now gleaming after Thomas spent countless weekends sanding and refinishing them. The kitchen that once had outdated appliances from the 70s now featured the farmhouse sink I had always dreamed of and the custom cabinets Thomas had built by hand. Every corner of that house held a precious memory. The living room bay window where we placed our Christmas tree each year, the creaky third step on the staircase that we never fixed because it became our natural alarm system when Catherine tried sneaking out as a teenager. The back porch where Thomas and I would sit with our coffee every Sunday morning, watching birds visit the feeder he had crafted. Catherine had been born in that house. I still remembered bringing her home and placing her in the nursery we had painted sunshine yellow. I could picture her first steps across the living room floor, rushing toward Thomas with her arms outstretched and a toothy grin. Her height marks still adorned the kitchen doorframe, tracking her growth from a tiny toddler to a confident young woman. We had celebrated every milestone in that house. Catherine's birthday parties in the backyard, with neighborhood children running through sprinklers in summer. Her high school graduation party, where Thomas had grilled his famous barbecue ribs for all her friends. Even the day she got accepted to college, we had a special dinner in the dining room with the good china we rarely used. I had been an elementary school teacher for 32 years before retiring. I taught second grade at Lincoln Elementary, just a 15-minute walk from our home. The neighborhood children knew me as Mrs. B, and parents would often stop me at the grocery store to chat about how their children were doing. Teaching had been my passion, but my family always came first. Catherine and I had always been close, especially after Thomas died. She would visit every Sunday for dinner, sometimes bringing homemade desserts she knew I loved. We would talk about her work in the financial sector, where she was quickly climbing the corporate ladder. She would call me for advice or just to chat about her day. I was so proud of the independent, successful woman she had become. Then Catherine met Jason at her company. He worked in the marketing department, and they met during a company retreat. When she first brought him home, I was impressed. Jason seemed polite and attentive. He complimented my cooking, asked Thomas questions when I showed him our wedding album, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He had a good job, came from a nice family in Connecticut, and appeared to make Catherine happy. What more could a mother want for her daughter? Their wedding was a small but lovely affair in our backyard. We strung fairy lights in the oak trees, set up a white tent, and Catherine looked breathtaking in her simple lace dress. I remembered crying when they exchanged vows, feeling both happiness for their new beginning and a pang of sadness that Thomas was not there to walk his daughter down the aisle. My brother Robert had that honor instead. But looking back, I realized there were subtle signs of change in Jason even then. During the reception, I overheard him talking to his friends about the small size of the wedding, saying they would have had something more lavish if it had been up to him. I noticed how he corrected Catherine a few times when she was telling stories, interrupting her with what he called more accurate versions. These were small things easily dismissed as wedding day stress or personality quirks. I had no idea they were warnings of what was to come. After the wedding, Catherine and Jason moved into a small apartment about 30 minutes away. They would still visit regularly, but I noticed Catherine would check her phone for texts from Jason throughout our conversations, sometimes cutting our time short because he needed her at home. She started declining my invitations to our favorite mother-daughter lunch spots, saying Jason preferred they save money by eating at home. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. About a year after the wedding, Catherine and Jason started talking about buying a home. The housing market in our area had skyrocketed, and they were struggling to find something within their budget. Each time they visited, they would discuss another house they had looked at and why it would not work. Either the commute was too long, the house needed too many repairs, or the neighborhood was not desirable. One evening, over dinner at my place, Catherine sighed heavily after describing yet another failed house hunting expedition. Jason chimed in about how the banks were being unreasonable with their lending criteria. I listened sympathetically, remembering how Thomas and I had also struggled when we were first looking to buy. That night after they left, I sat in Thomas's old armchair and thought long and hard about our house. It was too big for just me. I rattled around in it, using primarily the bedroom, kitchen, and living room. The other rooms mostly stayed closed, gathering dust. I was getting older, and maintaining such a large property was becoming more challenging. The property taxes were substantial, and while my teacher's pension and Thomas's life insurance provided financial stability, I wondered if downsizing might be wiser. More importantly, I thought about family legacy. Thomas and I had always intended for Catherine to inherit the house eventually. We had created this home for her future. I imagined grandchildren running up and down the same stairs Catherine had, playing in the same backyard, making new memories in this house we had filled with love. The next time Catherine and Jason visited, I proposed the idea. I would sign the house over to them now, with the condition that I could continue living there in my bedroom. They would not have a mortgage, only the responsibility of taxes, utilities, and maintenance. The house would stay in the family, and I would have company in my later years. It seemed like the perfect solution. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she hugged me tightly. She could not believe I would make such a generous offer. She kept saying how much it meant to her that her future children would grow up in her childhood home. Jason seemed surprised but pleased, nodding along as Catherine expressed her gratitude. When I mentioned my condition about keeping my bedroom and bathroom, Jason's smile tightened slightly. He asked if I had considered getting my own place, suggesting a nearby senior living community that had just opened. Catherine quickly interjected, assuring me they would love to have me stay, giving Jason a pointed look that silenced any further objections from him. We met with my attorney the following week to draw up the paperwork. My lawyer, Patricia Wilson, had been a friend for years and seemed concerned about my decision. She took me aside before we signed anything and asked if I was certain. She recommended including specific language about my right to reside in the home, comfortably for as long as I wished, with access to common areas. At the time, I thought she was being overly cautious. Catherine would never make me uncomfortable in my own home. Nevertheless, I agreed to the additional legal protections, if only to humor Patricia. The deed transfer was completed within a month. Catherine and Jason sold their apartment and moved in with their belongings over a weekend. Those first few weeks were lovely. We cooked meals together, with Jason surprisingly taking the lead on several occasions, preparing elaborate pasta dishes he said his Italian grandmother had taught him. We would watch movies in the evening. Catherine curled up next to me on the sofa like she used to as a child. I would wake up to find fresh coffee already made, and Jason reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, offering me the sections he had finished. I tried to make myself useful without being intrusive. I maintained the garden, growing tomatoes and zucchini in the summer months that we would use for dinner. I kept the common areas tidy and did small loads of laundry during the day when they were at work. I made myself scarce when they had friends over, usually retreating to my room with a good book. But small changes began to appear. One day I came downstairs to find that the family photos I had arranged on the living room mantel had been replaced with modern art pieces Jason had selected. The comfortable old sofa, where Thomas used to nap on Sunday afternoons, had been moved to the basement, replaced by a sleek leather sectional that was stylish, but nowhere near as comfortable. When I mentioned the photos, Catherine said they were thinking of creating a different aesthetic for the living room, but assured me the photos were safely stored in boxes. Jason added that the old decor made the house feel outdated, and they wanted to put their own stamp on the place. It was their house now, after all. I reminded myself that it was indeed their house now. I had given it to them, and they had the right to decorate as they wished. I retrieved a few of my favorite family photos and placed them in my bedroom instead. If the living room was their domain, now my bedroom would remain mine. As weeks turned into months, I noticed Catherine becoming more distant. Our conversations grew shorter, with her often checking the time or mentioning tasks she needed to complete. When I suggested our traditional mother-daughter lunch, she would claim to be too busy with work. Even at dinner, she seemed distracted, letting Jason dominate conversations with stories about his work accomplishments or complaints about his colleagues. One evening, while heading to the kitchen for a glass of water, I overheard Jason talking to Catherine in the living room. I had not intended to eavesdrop, but his mention of my name caught my attention. "Your mother is always hovering." He was saying, his voice low but clearly annoyed. "I feel like I cannot relax in my own home with her watching everything I do. Did you see how she rearranged the dishes I put in the dishwasher yesterday? And she keeps asking when we are going to have children. It is suffocating." I froze in the hallway, hurt flooding through me. I had only rearranged the dishes because Jason had placed them in a way that prevented proper cleaning. As for asking about grandchildren, I had mentioned it exactly once when Catherine had commented on a neighbour's new baby. Catherine's response hurt even more. I know. I will talk to her about giving us more space. Maybe we can suggest she join that senior book club at the library so she is out of the house more often." I quietly returned to my room, a lump forming in my throat. Was I truly being intrusive? I had been trying so hard to be helpful without getting in their way. That night I lay awake wondering if giving them the house had been a mistake. But it was too late now. The deed was done, literally. 2 weeks later, Catherine shared exciting news. She was pregnant. My initial joy was overwhelming. I would be a grandmother. I hugged her tightly already, imagining holding a tiny new life, another generation in our family home. I offered to help with the nursery, to be available for babysitting, to cook meals when the baby arrived. Catherine smiled tensely and said they would figure things out when the time came. That evening, Jason called a family meeting. Sitting stiffly at the dining room table, he explained that with a baby on the way, they needed to discuss some changes. They required more privacy and space for their growing family. From now on, he said I should use the kitchen only during designated hours when they were not using it. The living room would be off limits in the evenings so they could have private time as a couple. My laundry would be done only on Tuesdays so it would not interfere with theirs. I sat in stunned silence as he outlined these new rules in our home. My home. The home I had given them. Catherine stared at the table, not meeting my eyes. When I finally found my voice and asked why these changes were necessary, Jason's response was curt. "We need to establish boundaries now before the baby comes. You are used to having run of the house, but things are different now. This is our home, and we need to make it work for our family unit." I looked to Catherine, expecting her to object, or at least soften these harsh new boundaries. Instead, she nodded along with Jason's words. "Mum, We really appreciate everything you have done for us. But Jason is right. We need our space, especially with the baby coming. I am sure you understand." I did not understand. I did not understand how my presence in the kitchen could possibly interfere with their family life. I did not understand why I suddenly needed permission to use the washing machine in the home I had maintained for 35 years. But I nodded, not wanting to cause conflict, especially with Catherine pregnant. Over the following weeks, the restrictions tightened. Jason changed the Wi-Fi password without giving me the new one, claiming their plan had limited data, and my streaming was using too much bandwidth. I had to use my phone data instead, quickly exceeding my limit and incurring extra charges. When I asked Catherine for the new password, she apologetically said Jason handled the internet matters and I would need to discuss it with him. When I approached him, he was always too busy or promised to write it down later, but never did. I began to feel isolated in my own home. I could not stream my favorite shows, call my friends, or even look up recipes without watching my data usage. The kitchen, once my domain where I had prepared thousands of family meals, now felt like foreign territory where I was an unwelcome guest. I started preparing simple sandwiches and salads that I could quickly make during my allocated kitchen time, then retreat to my room to eat alone. Catherine seemed to notice my withdrawal, but said nothing. Occasionally I would catch her watching me with what looked like concern. But whenever I tried to talk to her about how I was feeling, Jason would appear interrupting our conversation with some urgent matter that required Catherine's attention. The final straw came when I heard Catherine on the phone with her friend Amanda, a conversation she did not know I could overhear from the hallway. "I know Mum seems unhappy, but Jason says she is just manipulating us with guilt to maintain control of the house. He thinks she never really wanted to give us the house in the first place, and is now trying to make us miserable so we will leave. But where would we go? We have already sold our apartment and invested so much in renovating this place." I was stunned. Jason was poisoning my daughter against me, making her believe I had ulterior motives when all I had ever wanted was her happiness. That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since Thomas died. I felt more alone than ever before. It was a particularly cold December evening when things reached their breaking point. Massachusetts winters can be brutal, and this one had brought heavy snowfall and temperatures dropping into the teens. I was in my room, wrapped in an extra sweater, because Jason had lowered the thermostat to save on heating costs. He claimed 65 degrees was plenty warm if you simply wore layers indoors. There was a sharp knock at my door, and before I could answer, Jason walked in, Catherine trailing behind him with an uncomfortable expression. "Beatrice." Jason began using my first name. Despite my previous requests to be called Mum, we need to discuss something important. He proceeded to explain that with Catherine now 5 months pregnant, they had been thinking about the nursery. The room across the hall from theirs would be perfect, but they also wanted a dedicated guest room for when their parents visited. That left only one option: my room would need to be converted into the guest room, and I would need to relocate. I waited for him to suggest the third bedroom downstairs, which was currently being used as a home office. Instead, Jason gestured toward the window. "We have had some work done on the garage. We have insulated it and set up a bed and small sitting area. It is perfectly comfortable for one person." My mouth fell open in shock. The detached garage had never been intended as living space. Yes, Thomas had insulated it years ago so he could work on his woodworking projects in winter, but it had no bathroom, no proper heating system, and certainly was not up to code for residential use. "You want me to live in the garage?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Catherine finally spoke up, not meeting my eyes. "It is just temporary, Mum. Just until we figure out a more permanent solution. The baby will be here in a few months, and we need to get everything ready." "Temporary? How temporary?" Where would I go after that? I asked, looking between them. Jason shrugged. We can discuss that when the time comes. For now, the garage is set up and ready for you. We would appreciate it if you could move your essential belongings by this weekend. I looked to Catherine, hoping to see some sign that she recognized the cruelty of what they were asking. Her hand rested protectively over her growing belly, but her eyes remained fixed on the floor. Catherine, sweetheart, you cannot be serious. The garage gets freezing in winter. There is no bathroom. I would have to come into the house every time I needed to use the toilet or shower. Jason interjected before Catherine could respond. We have added a space heater, and you can use the half bath on the first floor during the day. We will leave the back door unlocked until 10 p.m. After that, we would appreciate privacy as a family. I felt like I had been slapped. They were not only banishing me to the garage, but also restricting my access to basic facilities. I tried again to appeal to my daughter. Catherine, I gave you this house so we could be family, so your children could grow up in the same home you did, not so I could be treated like an unwelcome guest. For a brief moment, I thought I saw doubt in Catherine's eyes, but Jason placed his hand on her shoulder, and whatever hesitation she felt seemed to vanish. Mum, we are trying to make this work for everyone. The garage is a perfectly adequate space, and it is just until we figure things out with the baby. That night, I inspected the garage myself. They had indeed set up a single bed with a nightstand and lamp. A small desk and chair sat against one wall, and an old armchair from the basement had been placed near the space heater. The concrete floor was partially covered by a thin area rug. There was no television, no bathroom, not even a sink. A mini fridge that barely worked had been plugged in, containing a few bottles of water and an apple. This was to be my new home. The thought brought tears to my eyes. The next day, I made one more attempt to reason with them. I explained that at 67, with my arthritis acting up in cold weather, living in the garage could seriously impact my health. I reminded them that the deed transfer included my right to live comfortably in the house. Jason's response was cold and left no room for discussion. This is our house now, Beatrice. We have the right to decide how the space is used. If these arrangements do not suit you, you are welcome to find another place to live. But until then, these are our terms. Catherine remained silent, her loyalty clearly lying with her husband now. With a heavy heart, I moved my essential belongings to the garage that weekend. Jason helped carry my suitcases, acting as if he were doing me a great favor. Catherine arranged some of my toiletries in a basket I could carry to the half bath when needed. Neither seemed to recognize or care about the humiliation I felt. My first night in the garage was miserable. Despite the space heater, the temperature dropped to uncomfortable levels. I could see my breath in the air. I wore 2 sweaters, thick socks, and a hat to bed, huddling under the thin blankets they had provided. The mattress was old and sagged in the middle. Every time a car passed on the street, headlights swept across the walls as the small windows had no curtains. I needed to use the bathroom around 2 a.m., but remembered the house would be locked. I ended up using an old plant pot I found on a shelf, crying with shame as I did so. This was what my life had become. Over the next few weeks, my health began to deteriorate. The cold, damp conditions aggravated my arthritis. I developed a persistent cough that kept me awake at night. My hands were often too stiff to properly button my clothing in the mornings. I had to time my showers carefully during the day, when I knew both Catherine and Jason would be at work, as Jason had commented on the water bill and suggested I limit my showers to every other day. My neighbour Marjorie noticed me carrying laundry to the laundromat, despite having a perfectly good washing machine at home. When she asked why I made up a story about the washer being broken, I was too ashamed to admit the truth that my own daughter and son-in-law had essentially made me homeless while living on my property. One particularly cold night, when the temperature dropped to near freezing, I sat wrapped in every piece of clothing I owned, staring at an old photo of Thomas and me on our 30th anniversary. I wondered what he would say if he could see me now. Thomas had always been my protector, my advocate. He would never have allowed anyone to treat me this way, not even our own daughter. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge a painful truth. I had made a terrible mistake in gifting the house without better protections for myself. And now I needed to find a way out of this situation before it destroyed both my health and my dignity. The breaking point came unexpectedly through a routine phone call from my younger sister Sandra. Living in Florida with her husband of 40 years, Sandra and I tried to talk at least twice a month. She had been asking to visit for weeks, but I had made excuses not wanting her to see my living conditions. This time, when she called, I was huddled in the garage during a particularly nasty snowstorm. The space heater was struggling against the dropping temperature, and my voice was raspy from the persistent cough I had developed. "Beatrice, you sound terrible. Are you sick?" Sandra's concerned voice came through the phone. "Just a little cold," I assured her, but a fit of coughing undermined my claim. "That does not sound like a little cold. Where are you?" "It sounds echoey." I hesitated, but the weight of my situation had become too heavy to bear alone. "I am in the garage," I admitted quietly. "The garage? What are you doing in the garage during a snowstorm?" The story spilled out of me then, all of it. How I had given Catherine and Jason the house, how they had gradually pushed me out of the common areas, and finally how they had relegated me to the unheated garage with limited access to basic facilities. I told her about my deteriorating health, the humiliation of having to plan my bathroom visits, and the heartbreak of watching my daughter choose her husband's comfort over her mother's well-being. Sandra was silent for so long I thought we had lost connection. Then I heard her take a deep, shaky breath. "Beatrice Marie Wilson," she said, using my full name like our mother used to when we were in trouble. "You pack a bag right now. You are coming to stay with me in Florida." "I cannot just leave," I protested weakly. "Catherine is pregnant. My first grandchild will be born in a few months." "And you think they will let you be part of that child's life, when they will not even let you use the bathroom at night? Wake up, B. This is elder abuse, plain and simple." Elder abuse? The term hit me like a physical blow. Was that what this was? I had been so focused on not causing problems, on being understanding of the young couple's need for space, that I had not labeled their behavior for what it truly was. "I gave them the house," I said softly. "I signed it over completely." "Did you have a lawyer when you did this? Was there any agreement about your continued residence?" I thought back to Patricia's insistence on adding specific language to the deed transfer. "Yes, actually. My attorney added a clause about my right to reside comfortably in the home with access to common areas." "But what does that matter now? I cannot take my own daughter to court." "Why not?" Sandra's voice was steel. "She is taking advantage of you, B. That house is worth, what, $400,000? More, you gave them a fortune out of love. And this is how they repay you. You need to talk to your lawyer immediately." After ending the call with Sandra, I sat for a long time considering my options. The idea of legal action against my own daughter was painful, but so was the prospect of continuing to live in these conditions. My health was declining, and with it my ability to stand up for myself. The next day, I called Patricia Morgan, my attorney. She agreed to see me immediately when I explained the situation. Arriving at her office, I was embarrassed by my appearance. I had lost weight. My clothes hung loosely, and the persistent cough interrupted our conversation repeatedly. Patricia listened without interruption as I explained everything. When I finished, her expression was grave. "Beatrice, I was afraid something like this might happen. That is why I insisted on the residence clause in the deed transfer. Based on what you are telling me, Catherine and Jason are in clear violation of that agreement. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means we have options. We could petition the court to enforce the terms of the agreement requiring them to provide you with appropriate living quarters within the home. We could sue for damages based on the deterioration of your health due to the unsuitable living conditions. Or in the most extreme case, we could potentially move to rescind the deed transfer entirely on the grounds that they have failed to honour the conditions under which it was granted. The idea of rescinding the deed transfer, of taking back the house entirely, gave me pause. Would I really go that far? Before we discuss legal action, Patricia continued, seeing my hesitation, is there anyone else who might help mediate this situation? Sometimes family matters are best resolved within the family. That was when I remembered Charles, my son, from my first marriage, Catherine's half-brother. Charles was 15 years older than Catherine and had been living in New York for the past 20 years, where he had built a successful career as a corporate attorney. The two siblings had a complicated relationship. Charles had been away at college when Catherine was born, and they had never developed the close bond I had hoped for. I had not wanted to involve Charles in this situation, knowing the tension it might create between him and Catherine. But now I realized I needed an advocate who understood both family dynamics and legal implications, someone who would prioritize my well-being while still caring about the impact on Catherine. There is one person, I told Patricia, my son, Charles. That evening, back in the garage, I made the call I had been avoiding. Charles answered on the second ring, his deep voice instantly bringing comfort. Mum, everything okay? You usually email before calling. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the emotion of the past months caught up with me. No, Charles, everything is not okay. I need your help. Charles arrived in Massachusetts the very next day, taking the first available flight from New York. When he saw me waiting in the small coffee shop where we had agreed to meet, his face darkened with concern and anger. I knew what he was seeing, a far cry from the vibrant, independent woman I had been just months earlier. Mum, he said, embracing me carefully as if afraid I might break. What have they done to you? Over the next hour, I shared everything with Charles, showing him photos I had taken of my living conditions in the garage. His attorney mind kicked in immediately, asking precise questions about the deed transfer, the specific language of the residency clause, and any communications I had documented with Catherine and Jason regarding my living situation. This is unconscionable, he finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. They are violating not just the legal agreement, but basic human decency. We are going to fix this today. I felt a wave of anxiety. Charles, I do not want to destroy my relationship with Catherine. She is pregnant, and despite everything, I still want to be part of my grandchild's life. Charles took my hand across the table. Mum, they have already damaged that relationship by treating you this way. Sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to establish clear boundaries and consequences. Catherine needs to understand that what they are doing is not only legally actionable, but morally wrong. We drove to the house together in Charles's rental car. Seeing it from the outside, the beautiful Victorian home looked just as welcoming as it always had. Flower boxes that I had planted still hung from the windows, though the plants inside were now dead from neglect. The porch swing where Thomas and I had spent so many summer evenings still swayed gently in the winter wind. It was Saturday, so both Catherine and Jason were home. They were surprised to see Charles, as he rarely visited. Catherine greeted her brother with an awkward hug, while Jason offered a stiff handshake. Neither seemed to register the significance of Charles's unexpected appearance. What brings you all the way from New York? Catherine asked, one hand resting on her growing belly. Did Mum tell you about the baby? Charles's expression remained neutral as he stepped into the living room, taking in the changes they had made to the house. Actually, Mum told me about her current living arrangements. I think we need to have a family discussion. Jason immediately became defensive. If Beatrice has been complaining about the accommodations we have provided, she is being unreasonable. We have gone out of our way to create a comfortable space for her in the garage. The garage. Charles repeated, his tone dangerously calm. You have my 67-year-old mother who gifted you this $400,000 home living in an unheated garage in the middle of a Massachusetts winter. Catherine at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. It is just temporary, Charles. We needed her room for the nursery and guest room. We are trying to figure out a more permanent solution. Show me this garage, Charles demanded. Jason hesitated, then led the way outside. The temperature had dropped again, and our breath fogged in the air as we crossed the yard to the detached garage. Charles surveyed the space silently, taking in the single bed with its thin blankets, the inadequate space heater, the lack of proper insulation, and the concrete floor with its threadbare rug. When he spoke again, his voice was ice. This is where my mother has been sleeping in freezing temperatures with no bathroom access after 10 p.m., while you enjoy the warmth and comfort of the house she gave you. Jason puffed up his chest. This is our home now. We have the right to decide how the space is used. Beatrice agreed to the arrangement. Under duress, and with no real alternatives, Charles countered. And actually, this is not just your home. The deed transfer included specific language guaranteeing my mother the right to reside comfortably in the house, with access to common areas and facilities. You are in violation of that legal agreement. The color drained from Jason's face. What are you talking about? The house is in our names. Charles smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I took the liberty of reviewing the deed transfer documents this morning. As a corporate attorney with 20 years of experience, I can assure you the language is quite clear. My mother has every right to appropriate living quarters within the main house, not a makeshift bed in an unheated garage. We returned to the living room where Charles laid out the situation in unmistakable terms. They had two options, either restore my proper living arrangements within the house immediately, or face legal action that could result in financial damages or even the rescission of the entire deed transfer. You cannot be serious, Jason sputtered. You would sue your own sister over a temporary living arrangement. In a heartbeat, Charles replied without hesitation. What you are doing constitutes elder abuse, Jason. It is not just civilly actionable, but potentially criminal. Do you really want to test how seriously the courts take the mistreatment of elderly family members these days? Catherine, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Mom, is that how you feel? That we are abusing you? Her voice was small, and for the first time in months, she was looking directly at me, really seeing me. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. Catherine, I gave you this house because I love you, because I wanted you and your children to have the same happy home you grew up in. I never expected to be pushed aside, restricted from using common areas, and eventually relegated to the garage like an unwanted house guest. Yes, I feel mistreated. I feel betrayed by my own daughter. Tears filled Catherine's eyes. Jason said you were fine with the arrangements. He said you understood we needed our space as a family. I looked at Jason, who was now staring intently at the floor. I was never fine with it, Catherine. I went along with it because I did not want to cause problems, because I was afraid of losing you completely. Catherine turned to Jason, a new hardness in her expression. You told me Mum agreed to all of this. You said she was happy to give us privacy. Jason shifted uncomfortably. I may have overrepresented her enthusiasm, but the point stands. This is our house now, and we need to make decisions based on our family's needs. Mom is family, Catherine said sharply, surprising both Jason and me. She gave us this house so we could all be together, not so we could push her out into the cold. The dynamic in the room was shifting rapidly. Catherine moved away from Jason's side and came to sit next to me on the sofa, taking my hand in hers. Mum, I am so sorry. I got caught up in preparing for the baby and trying to make Jason happy. I did not see what was happening to you. Can you forgive me? Before I could answer, Jason interjected. Catherine, be reasonable. Where is your loyalty? We cannot have your mother interfering with how we raise our child. Catherine's head snapped up. My loyalty? My loyalty should have been to the woman who raised me, who gave us this house out of love, not to someone who would treat her like this. Charles, ever the strategist, seized the moment. Here is what is going to happen. Mom is coming with me to New York today. She will stay with me and my family while she recovers from the health issues caused by her current living conditions. Meanwhile, you two have a decision to make. Either buy out Mum's interest in this house at fair market value, or we proceed with legal action to rescind the deed transfer entirely. Jason's face reddened. Buy her out. We cannot afford that. We do not have $400,000 lying around. That is not my problem, Charles replied coldly. You should have thought of that before you decided to make my mother sleep in a freezing garage. You can take out a mortgage, sell the house, or find another solution. But one way or another, you will compensate Mum for what you have taken from her. Catherine was crying openly now. Mum, please, do not leave like this. We can fix this. You can have your old room back. I squeezed her hand gently. I think some time apart would be good for all of us, Catherine. I love you, and I want to be part of your life and your baby's life. But I need to take care of my health right now, and we need to find a solution that respects everyone's needs and rights. As Charles and I prepared to leave, Jason made one last desperate attempt. You cannot just take her away. We need to discuss this as a family. Charles's response was cutting. You lost the right to call yourself her family when you banished her to the garage. Consider yourself lucky we are not involving adult protective services yet. That afternoon, I packed my belongings while Catherine hovered anxiously nearby, repeatedly apologizing and begging me to reconsider. It broke my heart to see her distress, especially in her pregnant state, but I knew Charles was right. Sometimes you have to stand firm to rebuild a relationship on healthier terms. Before we left, I hugged Catherine and promised to call regularly. This is not goodbye forever, sweetheart. This is just me taking care of myself for a change. We will figure this out. As Charles drove us away from the house, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness at the breakdown of my relationship with Catherine, anger at Jason's manipulation, relief at escaping my degrading living situation, and a new sense of empowerment. For the first time in months, I had stood up for myself and demanded the respect I deserved. Charles glanced over at me. You okay, Mum? I nodded slowly. I will be. Thank you for making that call. My life changed dramatically after moving to New York with Charles. His spacious apartment in Manhattan had a comfortable guest room with a private bathroom. Luxuries I had almost forgotten. His wife Diana welcomed me warmly, and their teenage children, Sophia and Michael, seemed genuinely pleased to have their grandmother staying with them. The first order of business was addressing my health. Charles insisted I see his family doctor, who diagnosed me with bronchitis, developed from the cold, damp conditions in the garage. With proper medication, rest, and warmth, my cough gradually improved. Physical therapy helped with my arthritis, which had been severely aggravated by the cold. Simple comforts like regular hot showers, nutritious meals, and sleeping in a warm bed accelerated my recovery. Meanwhile, Charles was handling the legal aspects of my situation. After several tense phone calls and emails, Catherine and Jason agreed to buy out my interest in the house. They would take out a mortgage for $300,000. A compromise figure Charles negotiated down from the full market value as a concession to family relations. The money would be placed in a trust for my benefit, ensuring financial security for my future. 2 months into my stay in New York, Catherine called with news that surprised me. She and Jason had been in marriage counseling, prompted by the revelation of how he had manipulated her and mistreated me. During these sessions, other issues in their relationship had surfaced. Jason's controlling behavior extended beyond his treatment of me, affecting Catherine in ways she had not fully recognized. "Mum," she said hesitantly, "I am considering a trial separation after the baby is born. Jason and I have some fundamental differences in how we view family and relationships. The way he treated you opened my eyes to patterns I had been ignoring. I was careful not to express too much satisfaction at this news, concerned primarily for Catherine's well-being during her pregnancy. Whatever you decide, I support you, sweetheart. My main concern is your happiness and health, and that of my grandchild." "I know that now," she replied softly. "I should have known it all along." With the financial settlement from the house, I was able to make plans for my own future. After much consideration, I decided to purchase a small condominium near Charles in New York. It was a modern one-bedroom unit in a building with security and amenities for seniors, close enough to visit Charles regularly, but providing me with independence. Diana helped me furnish it with comfortable, practical pieces that reflected my taste while fitting the smaller space. The day I moved into my new home was emotional. Charles, Diana, and the children helped arrange everything, making sure I was comfortable with the layout and knew how to operate all the appliances. As we sat having pizza on my new sofa that evening, I felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. "I never imagined starting over at 67, I told Charles as he was leaving. "But in a way, it feels like a fresh beginning." He hugged me tightly. "You deserve this, Mum. A place that is truly yours, where you make the rules and no one can take advantage of your generosity." A month later, Catherine gave birth to a beautiful baby girl she named Lily Thomas, honoring her father. She sent photos immediately and asked if I would visit once they were settled at home. I agreed, booking a flight to Massachusetts for the following month. Though apprehensive about returning to the house where I had suffered such indignity, I was determined to be part of my granddaughter's life. The visit was both healing and awkward. Jason was polite but distant, clearly uncomfortable with my presence. Catherine was more attentive than she had been in years, constantly checking if I needed anything, almost overcompensating for her previous neglect. Baby Lily was perfect, with Catherine's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair like her grandfather's. I stayed at a nearby hotel, refusing Catherine's offer to use the guest room in the house. Some boundaries, once crossed, require time and space to rebuild. Each morning, I would come over to spend time with Catherine and Lily, helping with baby care and household tasks while Catherine rested. In the evening, I returned to my hotel, giving the new parents their space while preserving my own sense of dignity. On my last day, as Catherine walked me to my rental car, she asked the question I knew had been on her mind. "Do you think you will ever forgive me, Mum?" I considered my answer carefully. "Sweetheart, I already have forgiven you. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting or putting myself in a position to be hurt again. I love you, and I will always be your mother. But I have learned that I need to protect myself, even from the people I love most." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand. I want to rebuild your trust, even if it takes years." Over the following months, Catherine and I developed a new relationship based on mutual respect, rather than my unconditional giving. We talked on the phone several times a week, and she sent daily photos and updates about Lily. 3 months after my visit, she confirmed what she had hinted at earlier. She and Jason were separating. He had moved into an apartment nearby, and they were working out custody arrangements for Lily. "The house feels different without him," she admitted during one of our calls. "Bigger, more peaceful. I am redecorating slowly, making it feel like home again." I put the family photos back up on the mantel. My new life in New York developed its own pleasant rhythms. I joined a book club and a walking group for seniors, making new friends who knew nothing of my past difficulties. I volunteered at a local elementary school, reading to children once a week, tapping into my teaching background. Charles and his family visited regularly, and we established a tradition of Sunday dinners together. 6 months after purchasing my condo, I received an unexpected letter from Jason. In it, he apologized for his behavior, acknowledging that his treatment of me had been inexcusable. He explained that he had been raised in a household where his father had controlled all aspects of family life, and he had unconsciously replicated those patterns. He was now in therapy, working to address these issues. He did not ask for forgiveness, merely stating that he wanted me to know he recognized the harm he had caused. I appreciated the apology, but felt no obligation to respond. Some chapters in life need to be closed firmly with no loose ends. As for the house, Catherine continued to live there with Lily, making mortgage payments that ultimately benefited my trust fund. In a way, the house had served its purpose. It had provided a home for my family, taught all of us valuable lessons about boundaries and respect, and ultimately given me the financial security to create a new life on my own terms. Looking back on that difficult period now, I realized something important. When I gave Catherine the house, I thought I was securing my place in the family by making myself indispensable. I believed that by giving everything away, I would be valued and included. Instead, I learned that true security comes not from what you give others, but from what you preserve for yourself. Your dignity, your independence, and your self-respect. Sometimes the most important call you can make is not to others, but to yourself. Recognizing your own worth and standing firm in your truth. That cold day when I finally reached out to Charles was not just about finding escape from an intolerable situation. It was about reclaiming my voice, my agency, and ultimately my life. I wonder, have you ever had to make a difficult decision to stand up for yourself, even when it meant confronting family? Would you have done anything differently in my situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear that it is never too late to start over and reclaim your dignity. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the hardest calls to make lead to the most beautiful new beginnings.